A gay chef who recently came out is working like any other night, only to be fired by the manager due to discrimination. Without the manager knowing, he is about to get instant karma that will happen throughout the story. Comment where you're watching from and let us know your thoughts. The evening rush at Carmine's Italian restaurant was reaching its peak when James Thompson realized tonight would change everything. Steam rose from perfectly plated dishes as he moved through the kitchen with practiced grace, his black apron dusted with flour from the fresh focaccia he'd prepared earlier. After 3 years of working as a senior line cook, he knew every inch of this kitchen like the back of his hand. He also knew that his secret was about to come out, whether he was ready or not. The kitchen buzzed with its usual symphony of sounds, knives chopping against cutting boards, pans sizzling on burners, and the constant ding of the order bell. James had always found comfort in this chaos, but tonight each sound seemed to echo his racing heartbeat. The weight of his phone in his pocket felt heavier than usual, knowing it contained the Instagram post that would likely reach his boss's eyes soon enough. "Order up for table 12, James called out, sliding 2 plates of steaming chicken piccata onto the pass. Sarah, one of the veteran servers, grabbed them with a grateful nod. She was one of the few people at work who knew the truth about him, and her supportive smiles had kept him going through some of the hardest days. Just last week, she'd helped him through a panic attack in the walk-in freezer after a particularly homophobic remark from their manager during the staff meeting. The restaurant's manager, Robert Walsh, watched from his usual spot near the kitchen entrance, his arms crossed and his face set in its customary scowl. Robert had been running Carmine's for the past decade with an iron fist and what many staff members privately called old-school values. James had heard him make enough casual comments during staff meetings to know exactly where he stood on alternative lifestyles. Just last month, Robert had gone on a 10-minute rant about a competing restaurant that had hosted a Pride event, calling it inappropriate and bad for business. Marco, the dishwasher, bumped James's shoulder as he passed with a stack of clean plates. "Hey, I saw that photo of you and Michael at the pier. You guys look really happy, man." His voice was low but supportive, and James felt a surge of gratitude for his co-workers who had slowly become like family. Well, most of them, anyway. "Thompson," Robert's voice cut through the kitchen noise. "My office after close. Need to discuss the new menu items." James nodded, his stomach tightening. He'd planned to have this conversation next week, but maybe this was a sign. His boyfriend Michael's social media post from their date last night had already gotten hundreds of likes, including from several regular customers. The photos showed them sharing a sunset kiss at Navy Pier, with a caption about celebrating 2 years together. It was tasteful, romantic, and completely ordinary, except that it would shatter the careful facade James had maintained at work. The rest of the dinner service passed in a blur of tickets, sizzling pans, and carefully plated dishes. James took pride in every plate that left his station, even as anxiety gnawed at his insides. He thought about all the family recipes he'd contributed to the menu, how he'd covered countless shifts when others called in sick, and how he'd trained nearly every new kitchen staff member over the past year. Would any of that matter once Robert knew the truth? By the time the last customer left and the cleaning crew started their work, his chef's coat was soaked with sweat that had nothing to do with the kitchen heat. He watched as Luis, the prep cook, covered the remaining ingredients and stored them away. In the dining room, the soft clink of glasses being cleared mingled with the muffled conversations of servers counting their tips. Sarah caught his arm as he headed toward Robert's office. "You okay? Want me to wait around?" Her face showed the concern she couldn't fully voice. They both knew what Robert was capable of. They'd seen him fire people for much less than this. "I'll be fine," James assured her, though his voice wavered slightly. "Just need to be honest for once." He touched the phone in his pocket, making sure the recording app was still running. A suggestion from Michael, who worked in HR at another company and knew too well how these situations could play out. Robert's office was a small room tucked behind the wine storage, its walls covered in old reviews and photos of celebrities who'd visited Carmine's over the years. The manager sat behind his cluttered desk, scrolling through something on his phone with a deepening frown. The room smelled of stale coffee and the cigars Robert wasn't supposed to smoke indoors. "Sit down, Thompson," Robert said without looking up. Interesting things showed up on my Facebook feed today. One of our regulars, Mrs. Davidson, she shared some posts about one of my cooks. Care to explain? James took a deep breath, remembering all the nights he'd laid awake rehearsing this moment. He thought about Michael's encouraging words this morning, about the younger server who'd recently confided in him about his own struggles with coming out, about the responsibility he felt to be the person he needed when he was younger. Actually, sir, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. I'm gay and I'm tired of hiding it. Michael is my boyfriend and we've been together for 2 years now. The silence that followed felt heavier than a full sack of flour. Robert's face went through several shades of red before settling on a dangerous purple. You're telling me, he said slowly, that I've had one of your kind working in my kitchen, around my staff, around my customers? His hand gripped his desk so hard his knuckles turned white. My sexuality has nothing to do with my ability to cook, James replied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. I'm the same person who's been running your kitchen successfully for 3 years. The same person who created half the specials on our menu. The same person you gave Employee of the Month to just last quarter. Robert's fist came down hard on the desk, making the frame reviews rattle on the walls. Like hell it doesn't. Do you know what this could do to our reputation? This is a family restaurant. I've built this business catering to decent, normal people. Being gay doesn't make me any less family-friendly, James argued, but Robert was already pulling out a termination form from his desk drawer. The familiar blue paper seemed to mock everything James had worked for. I'm firing you for inappropriate social media conduct that reflects poorly on the establishment, Robert announced, scribbling on the form with enough force to nearly tear the paper. Clear out your station tonight. I don't want you back in my kitchen. And don't expect a reference. James sat there stunned as Robert shoved the paperwork across the desk. In the back of his mind, he'd known this might happen, but the reality hit him like a punch to the gut. With trembling fingers, he pulled out his phone and pressed the stop button on the voice recorder app, careful to keep the movement hidden under the desk. Sarah was waiting outside, her face pale with concern. Behind her stood 3 other members of the kitchen staff, all wearing expressions of disbelief. They'd heard everything through the thin office walls. Luis had his phone out, already typing furiously. I'm so sorry, James, Sarah whispered, pulling him into a tight hug. But we're not letting him get away with this. Not in 2024. Not in our restaurant. James nodded slowly, his mind already working through his options. As he walked to his station to collect his personal knives and tools, he couldn't help but notice how many phones were out, how many people were typing furiously on social media. The kitchen staff, the servers, even the hostess. All of them witnesses to discrimination they couldn't ignore. The night air was cool on James's face as he walked to his car, his knife roll under one arm and his phone clutched in his other hand. He had evidence of wrongful termination, a support network of outraged co-workers, and a determination to ensure no one else would face what he just did. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, he felt something unexpected. Relief. For the first time in 3 years, he was completely unashamedly himself. By morning, everything was about to change, and the truth will be showed. James woke up the next morning to his phone buzzing nonstop. The video that Sarah had secretly recorded through the office window had exploded overnight. His hands shook as he scrolled through hundreds of notifications. Your Shusher Carmine's discriminates wasn't just trending locally anymore. It had gone national. Have you seen the news? Michael's voice came through the speaker. He'd stayed up most of the night monitoring the social media storm. 3 major news stations want to interview you, and that food critic from the Tribune, Amanda Rivera, she just canceled her review reservation and posted about why. The support was overwhelming. Former Carmine's employees were coming forward with their own stories about Robert's discrimination. A lesbian couple shared how they'd been seated in the back corner last month, away from regular customers. A former busboy revealed he'd been fired last year after Robert found out he was transgender. Sarah sent him a video of the lunch shift. The usually packed dining room was nearly empty, with more protesters outside than customers inside. They carried signs reading, "Love is love," and "Hate has no place in food." Local LGBTQ plus organizations had organized a peaceful protest that was growing by the hour. "The kitchen's a mess without you," Louis texted, along with a photo of burnt garlic bread. "Half the staff called in sick today. Robert's losing it." Robert had tried damage control, posting a statement about Carmine's being a traditional family establishment. The response was swift and brutal. Food delivery apps were flooded with one-star reviews. Local businesses began pulling their catering contracts. Even the mayor's office released a statement condemning discrimination in the city's restaurants. James sat on his couch, watching it all unfold on multiple screens. Michael had taken the day off to be with him, making calls to LGBT plus legal organizations and documenting everything. The recording from James's phone had been authenticated by a digital forensics expert, leaving no doubt about what had happened. "You should see this," Michael said, handing James his tablet. The screen showed a new post from Tony Carmine himself, the original owner's son who had sold the restaurant to Robert 5 years ago, but still held certain contract rights. The message was brief but powerful. "This is not what Carmine's was built to be. My father welcomed everyone to his tables. Change is coming." Around noon, a local news van parked outside James's apartment. The reporter, Diana Chen, had a reputation for covering social justice issues. "Your story's resonating with a lot of people," she explained as her crew set up. "Not just about discrimination, but about standing up for yourself, about co-workers supporting each other." James agreed to the interview, his cooking whites crisp and clean. He spoke about his love for the kitchen, about the family recipes he'd helped perfect, about the regular customers who'd become friends. "It was never about causing trouble," he explained. "It was about being honest about who I am." The interview was barely over when Sarah called again. "You need to see what's happening," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "Remember those health code violations Robert kept ignoring? Someone sent all the documentation to the health department. They just showed up for a surprise inspection." Back at Carmine's, Robert's day was getting worse by the hour. The health inspectors found multiple violations he'd been covering up. Former employees were arriving with their own stories of discrimination, wage theft, and harassment. Local news crews captured it all, while protesters continued to grow in number. By late afternoon, Carmine's discriminates had reached millions of impressions. Food critics, celebrities, and social justice organizations were sharing James's story. But it was the local response that touched him most. Regular customers posting memories of his cooking, fellow chefs offering him positions, culinary students praising his courage. "Check your email," Michael said, looking up from his laptop. "The Human Rights Campaign wants to feature your story, and there's a James Beard award-winning chef who wants to talk about a potential partnership." James was about to respond when his phone lit up with a text from Marco, one of the younger line cooks. "You need to come see this. Robert just got escorted out." The video Marco sent showed Robert being let out of the restaurant by the restaurant group's corporate representatives. They'd called an emergency board meeting in response to the crisis. Robert's expression was a mix of rage and disbelief as he watched his traditional values crumble in the face of modern justice. Tony Carmine was seen entering the restaurant shortly after, heading straight for a meeting with the staff. The message was clear. Change wasn't just coming, it had arrived. Sarah's next update included a photo of the new sign being posted on Carmine's door. "Closed for renovation and restructuring, reopening soon as an inclusive establishment for all." The comment section exploded with support, with many promising to become first-time customers when the restaurant reopened. James sat back, emotionally exhausted but hopeful. His phone kept buzzing with messages of support, job offers, and interview requests. Michael squeezed his hand, proud tears in his eyes. "You did it, babe. You stood up not just for yourself, but for everyone who's ever been afraid to be themselves." A notification popped up. Sarah had started a GoFundMe for the staff who'd be out of work during the renovation. The response was immediate and generous, with many donors leaving messages about their own experiences with workplace discrimination. "It's not over yet," James said, looking at all the messages of support. "But at least now everyone knows that being yourself shouldn't cost you your career." The sun was setting when James finally checked the video's viral stats. Over 2 million views and climbing. Each share, each comment, each message of support proved what he'd hoped all along, that love and justice could triumph over hate and discrimination, one kitchen at a time. The summer sun sparkled off Carmine's newly installed rainbow-tinted windows as James adjusted his executive chef's jacket. The gold embroidery still felt surreal. James Thompson, executive chef and partner. The restaurant's reopening was just hours away, and the transformation went far beyond just the new decor. "Never thought I'd see the day," Sarah mused, now the front-of-house manager, arranging menus that proudly displayed their new mission statement, serving love, acceptance, and amazing food since 1962. She'd turned down 3 job offers to stay and be part of the change. "Remember when we were afraid to even mention our partners at work?" The past 3 months had been a whirlwind. After Robert's very public exit, Tony Carmine had made good on his promise of change. He'd approached James with an unexpected proposition: become a partner in the revamped restaurant and help create a workplace where everyone could be themselves. The renovation wasn't just about new paint and furniture. It was about building a new culture. "Chef, the news crews are setting up outside," Louis called from the kitchen. He'd been promoted to sous chef, his talent finally recognized without Robert's prejudices holding him back. The kitchen staff now represented a beautiful spectrum of humanity, each bringing their unique perspectives to the menu. James walked through his domain, inspecting each station. The kitchen had been redesigned with input from the entire staff, creating an efficient and inclusive space. Gone were the cramped corners and hidden prep areas Robert had used to segregate workers he deemed different. The new layout encouraged collaboration and communication. "And then, look who's here," Michael said, entering through the back door. He carried a massive arrangement of flowers from the Human Rights Campaign. Their story had become a catalyst for change in the restaurant industry, inspiring other establishments to examine their practices and policies. The local restaurant association had even created new guidelines for inclusive hiring and workplace protection. The viral video of James's firing had reached over 10 million views, but its impact went beyond numbers. Dozens of workers had found the courage to come forward with their own stories of discrimination. Robert, it turned out, wasn't an isolated case, but his very public downfall had sent a clear message to others like him. "You won't believe who just confirmed for dinner service," Sarah announced, checking the reservation system. "Remember that food critic, Amanda Rivera? She's coming with the entire editorial board, and Tony Carmine's flying in with his husband. They want to be here for opening night." Outside, the crowd was growing. Regular customers who'd boycotted under Robert's management stood alongside new faces, all eager to support the reformed establishment. Local LGBTQ+ organizations had helped promote the reopening, and the response had been overwhelming. They were booked solid for the next 3 months. James gathered his staff for the pre-service meeting, a tradition he'd maintained but transformed. The gathering space now featured a wall of photos showcasing the staff's diversity, families, partners, pride celebrations, cultural events. Robert's old office had been converted into a comfortable break room where everyone was welcome. 3 months ago, I thought I'd lost everything," James began, looking at the familiar faces who'd stood by him. "Instead, we found something bigger than ourselves. Today isn't just about serving food, it's about serving hope." He paused, emotion thick in his voice. "Every person who walks through those doors should feel what I feel now. Proud, accepted, and free to be themselves." The speech was interrupted by a commotion at the front door. Through the windows, they could see Robert Walsh himself, attempting to push past the security guard. His face was red with familiar rage as he waved what looked like legal papers. But times had changed. The staff didn't cower or hide. Instead, they stood together, watching calmly as the police officers who'd been stationed outside for the opening quietly escorted Robert away. His threats of lawsuits had proven empty. The evidence of his discrimination was too clear, and his reputation was irreparably damaged. "Table numbers are already streaming in on social media," Michael reported, showing James's phone. The hashtag #SharkCarmine's comeback was trending, alongside photos of the new inclusive artwork adorning the walls and the special rainbow-inspired dessert menu. At exactly 5 o'clock, Sarah opened the doors. The line of waiting customers burst into applause. James watched from the kitchen pass as people of all backgrounds filled the dining room, many wiping away tears as they read the new mission statement and saw themselves represented in the staff and the artwork. "Order in!" The familiar call brought a smile to James's face as he turned to his station. The first ticket of the night was from a teenage couple, two boys on their first date, who'd chosen Carmine's because they knew they'd be welcome. As the kitchen sprang to life around him, James felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The aromas of garlic, fresh herbs, and simmering sauces filled the air. But there was something else, too, the sweet scent of change. Robert's discrimination had tried to end his career, but instead it had launched a movement. The night flew by in a blur of perfectly executed dishes and joyful celebrations. Every table had a story: families celebrating their LGBTQ+ children, couples on first dates, longtime customers returning to support the change, and new faces drawn by the promise of acceptance. Near closing time, Tony Carmine raised a toast in the packed dining room. "My father believed that food brings people together," he announced, his husband proudly by his side. "Tonight proves that love is the most important ingredient of all." James looked around at his chosen family, his staff, his supporters, his Michael, and knew that sometimes the worst moments in life could lead to the best changes. The new Carmine's wasn't just a restaurant. It was a symbol of hope, a testament to courage, and proof that standing up for yourself could create waves of positive change for others. As the last customers left, their hearts and bellies full, James updated the specials board for tomorrow. Below the featured dishes, he wrote the words that had become their unofficial motto: "At Carmine's, you can bring your whole self to the table."